And I'm proud to announce $1 billion through the BDC to support the steel, aluminum, and copper sectors. The BDC will be offering favorable terms for 3-year loans. The loans will be between $2 million up to $50 million. The first year will be 0 interest rate, and afterwards, year 2nd and 3rd will be very low rates. There will be no repayment for the entire 3 years, only actually interest to be paid on these loans. And at the end of the 3-year, that's when repayment will be asked.
Something big just happened behind the scenes. Canada is protecting its workers and key industries, making sure they stay strong during this trade fight. But while Canada builds strength, the US might soon realize this move could turn the pressure back on them in ways they did not expect. Minister Mélanie Joly and AI and Digital Innovation Minister Evan Solomon announced a $1.5 billion relief package for Canadian industries hit by American tariffs, with Joly stating directly, "We're in a trade war, we're on the front lines, and the goal is to protect workers and actually keep companies." That framing front lines is not diplomatic language softened for public consumption. It is a precise description of where Canada's manufacturing sector currently stands. The United States currently imposes a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, along with a 50% tariff on certain copper products from Canada. These are not incidental disruptions to marginal industries. Steel, aluminum, and copper underpin the automotive supply chain, the construction sector, the defense manufacturing base, and the energy infrastructure that both countries depend on. A 50% tariff applied to the foundational inputs of North American manufacturing is a structural shock that compounds with every passing month it remains in place. The $1.5 billion package is Canada's response to that compounding damage, not a one-time emergency measure, but a structured intervention designed to keep companies solvent, keep workers employed, and keep production capacity intact through a trade conflict with no defined endpoint. The package is broken into 2 distinct components. The first is $1 billion in loans provided through the Business Development Bank of Canada. Those loans will range between $2 million and $50 million per recipient. The first year of each loan carries an interest rate of 0, followed by very low interest rates in the 2nd and 3rd years. No repayment is required for the entire 3-year period, only interest payments during that window, with full repayment required at the end of year 3. The structure of those lending terms is worth examining carefully because it tells you what the government believes the timeline of this trade conflict looks like. A 0-interest loan with a 3-year repayment deferral is not emergency bridge financing for a company facing a temporary disruption. It is medium-term survival financing for an industry operating in an environment where the disruption may last years rather than months. The government is not assuming the tariffs will be resolved in the next quarter or the next 2 quarters. It is building a financial cushion large enough to sustain affected manufacturers through whatever negotiating timeline the customer review process ultimately produces. Whether that is a comprehensive resolution by July 1st, a prolonged annual review structure, or something in between. The second component of the package is $500 million in additional funding through the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, a Canadian government fund specifically designed to shelter Canadian businesses from the impacts of Trump's tariffs. AI and Digital Innovation Minister Solomon described the funding as intended to encourage small and medium enterprises to make strategic pivots, improve productivity, diversify markets, and stay competitive. The diversification language embedded in that description connects directly to the broader strategic posture Canada has been building throughout the trade conflict. Helping manufacturers diversify markets is not simply about finding alternative buyers for steel billets or aluminum ingots. It is about reducing the structural dependence on American demand that has historically left Canadian industry exposed to exactly the kind of tariff pressure now being applied. Every Canadian manufacturer that successfully develops a European or Asian customer relationship during this period is a manufacturer that enters future trade negotiations from a stronger position, one that is less susceptible to the leverage that American market dependence has historically provided to Washington negotiators. The sectoral targeting of this package also reflects a specific strategic judgment about which industries are most critical to preserve. Steel and aluminum are not just economic sectors. They are foundational to Canada's defense industrial capacity at a moment when the country has committed to reaching NATO's 2% GDP spending target and is actively expanding its defense manufacturing footprint. The Hanwha APMA joint venture to manufacture armored vehicles in Canadian automotive plants, the NATO AWACS contract awarded to the Saab bombardier GlobalEye, the submarine procurement competition that could be worth up to $120 billion over its life cycle. All of these require domestic industrial capacity in exactly the metals sectors that the 50% American tariff is currently attacking. Preserving that capacity is not just an economic question. It is a national security question. The business development bank loans flowing to steel and aluminum producers also serve a signaling function for private capital markets. One of the most damaging secondary effects of sustained tariff pressure is not the direct cost increase, but the investment uncertainty it creates. A manufacturer facing 50% tariffs on its primary market does not expand capacity, upgrade equipment, or take on new workforce commitments because the investment horizon is too uncertain to justify the capital. Government-backed financing at zero interest for the first year addresses that uncertainty directly. It tells affected manufacturers and their suppliers that the federal government considers their industries structurally viable and worth sustaining through a trade conflict, which in turn allows those businesses to make the operational decisions they would otherwise defer. The $500 million Regional Tariff Response Initiative component targets the specific vulnerability of small and medium enterprises, which face the same tariff disruptions as large manufacturers, but without the balance sheet depth to absorb prolonged revenue shocks or fund their own market diversification efforts. A large integrated steel producer may have the financial capacity to explore European sales channels or renegotiate supply contracts while absorbing margin compression from tariffs. A 200-person fabricated metals company in Hamilton or Sault Ste. Marie does not. The regional fund provides the capital access that allows smaller manufacturers to make the strategic pivots that the trade environment is forcing without requiring them to self-fund those transitions from already compressed margins. Joly's front lines characterization is worth returning to as the full scope of the package is considered. The language is deliberate. Canada is not describing itself as a bystander absorbing collateral damage from a trade conflict primarily between other parties. It is describing itself as a direct participant in an active economic contest, one that requires sustained institutional support for the industries and workers on the front lines of that contest. The $1.5 billion package is the financial expression of that framing, not accommodation, not endurance, but active defense of industrial capacity that Canada has determined is strategically essential to preserve regardless of how long the tariff conflict continues. The CUSMA review deadline of July 1st remains the formal endpoint of the current negotiating phase. Both sides have publicly acknowledged that a comprehensive resolution before that deadline is unlikely. What Canada is doing with this announcement is ensuring that its manufacturing sector arrives at whatever negotiating outcome eventually emerges with its production capacity intact, its workforce employed, and its market diversification underway. The tariffs are designed to compress Canada's options. The $1.5 billion is designed to ensure that compression does not become permanent.